for Ukraine?
I hope that they decide to follow President Trump and his team's lead on this, because let's not forget, until President Trump was elected, there was no European leader even working toward peace. In fact, it was scuttled back in 2022 by the EU. And I think quietly in the background, some of these leaders may have been working against the efforts to reach a negotiated peace settlement, encouraging Ukraine and Zelensky to have unrealistic expectations of what this is going to look like.
In this segment, we're going to watch one of Donald Trump's most loyal defenders, Carla Sands, call her whatever you think fits, come under real pressure near the end of the interview, particularly over Trump's blatant double standards on free speech. Along the way, there's also a revealing back and forth about Trump's approach to the war between Russia and Ukraine, but the moment you really don't want to miss comes later, when she's directly confronted about Trump preaching free speech abroad while undermining it at home. That exchange is exactly why you should watch this all the way through. As always, we're going to let the clip play out in full first, and then I'll break down my own thoughts afterward. I'll also include a link to the complete BBC News episode in the description below.
So the new White House national security strategy talks about wanting Ukraine to survive as a viable state. But is being asked to give up territory that Ukraine holds to Russia compatible with being a viable state? I mean, do you think Donald Trump would regard himself as the leader of a viable state if he was asked to give up parts of Texas to Mexico?
But you're actually conflating two things, and this is irrelevant. The fact is that Ukraine has no pathway to win this war. President Trump and his team are attempting to, I believe, de-escalate this war and get this process on a good glide path to find first a ceasefire and then an end to the hostilities. He wants to make sure that Ukraine, and you can read that right in the national security strategy. It's not a long read. It's available publicly. It's a public document. So we can see that President Trump wants Ukraine to remain a sovereign nation, as he hopes the rest of Europe and the UK will remain sovereign nations. At America First Policy Institute, we look at the America First agenda and we say, let's have our allies have a nation first agenda, secure borders, controlled immigration, protection of the rule of law, affordable and abundant energy, protection of your beautiful culture, freedom of speech, if that's part of your constitution, the fact that every nation should put their citizens first, a credible defense, make sure that you can be a viable country and secure. We need that in every one of our allies.
Now, a big theme for Donald Trump is free speech. And in this new White House document, it accuses Europe of censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition. But isn't that exactly what the Trump administration is doing in the United States? I'm thinking of how in September, President Trump celebrated ABC's suspension of the critic Jimmy Kimmel, his show. That was great news for America. And in July, Donald Trump filed that lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch over its reporting of his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. So it's OK for President Trump to limit free speech in the US, but not OK for that to happen in Europe.
Not at all. So free speech is the foundation of our shared, I would say especially UK and US, our shared values. How we got free speech in the United States was from the UK, from hundreds of years ago. And so if we can maintain that, we will be able to have open societies. Once you allow one side to decide what is acceptable speech and not acceptable speech, you have a totalitarian government, because then you will have no free exchange of ideas. And it is happening. Just in Ireland, Enoch Burke, a teacher, because he wouldn't use a student's pronouns. He's been jailed now, and he'll be in prison over Christmas.
Carla Sands, may I politely say that you're evading my question? And the question is that Donald Trump seems to be happy to go to courts to impose limits on free speech in your country and then lecture Europe about imposing limits on free speech over in Europe.
If he sues a network or entity, a newspaper, it's because they have done something that's broken the law. Otherwise, he wouldn't waste his time. He absolutely works to maintain his reputation. He doesn't allow himself to be taken advantage of by these networks. And most of them have been working lockstep with the leftist Democrats in the United States.
But if you believe in free speech, if you believe in that, I think it's the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, that is an unequivocal principle. You stand by that. You don't go to the courts when you don't like what people are saying.
Well, when it's unfair or illegal activity, you do go to the courts. But absolutely, I would say most people who are part of the circle of America First do believe absolutely in free speech. We're really worried about this Digital Services Act that the EU has passed, because I do believe that that is a kind of war against the United States. They are working to fine companies like Elon Musk, because he allows free speech. They're attempting to censor the speech in the United States of U.S. citizens. That is blatantly not okay. And it is, I believe, it's a gray zone act of war and must end.
All right, so I'm not going to waste any more time. I want to give you my honest reaction to what we just watched. Sitting here right now, I genuinely feel like I'm questioning reality. It's one of those moments where you stop and ask yourself whether you're living in the same world as everyone else, because the contradiction on display is staggering. The sheer nerve of anyone connected to Donald Trump standing up and lecturing others about free speech is beyond embarrassing. This is the same man who regularly attacks Europe and the UK for supposedly suppressing expression, while at the same time backing crackdowns on protests, journalists, and critics on social media back in the United States. We've seen people legally in the country, including visa holders whose First Amendment protections still apply, rounded up and removed anyway. And yet somehow he feels entitled to lecture Europe about how we handle free speech. Based on what we've already seen in just the early phase of his administration, he is quite literally the last person who should be speaking on the subject. Trump loves to praise the First Amendment when it suits him. J.D. Vance does the same thing when he travels abroad, telling the world that free speech is the backbone of democracy. But in practice, Trump consistently demands the firing, silencing, or suing of anyone who criticizes him or those aligned with him. He rails against cancel culture overseas, while actively pushing boycotts and punishments against American companies and public figures who don't fall in line. He claims to support open expression online, yet he has pushed policies and executive actions aimed directly at social media platforms that dared to moderate his content. And let's be honest, when you look at figures like Mark Zuckerberg or even Elon Musk sitting next to him, it genuinely feels like they're under pressure rather than acting freely. Blink twice if you're okay, Mark. That's the atmosphere this man has created. And then, with all of that on his record, he turns around and scolds Europe and the UK about supposed free speech violations. It's breathtaking hypocrisy. This isn't someone exercising self-reflection. This is someone with no self-awareness whatsoever. And Carla Sanz, acting as his defender, just keeps stepping forward to justify the unjustifiable, eroding her own credibility every single time she opens her mouth. Even when the host pushed her directly, her defense completely fell apart. It was inconsistent, evasive, and frankly weak. You can't defend something that doesn't hold up. Donald Trump does not actually respect the First Amendment, and that's exactly why his behavior toward critics looks increasingly authoritarian, more in line with how someone like Vladimir Putin deals with opposition than how a democratic leader should. Now, I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Trump has the right to talk about free speech at all, given his record? Or do you think the hypocrisy speaks for itself? And while you're down there, do me a favor and hit the like button. It helps the video reach more people. Subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. And I appreciate every single one of you. I'll see you in the next clip.